Cate from Gen V is the most realistic villain in all of television, and I'm going to break her down psychologically. We're going to start with her story to figure out what made her the way she is, because she wasn't always this way, this conflicted, evil way. I'm also going to give you some psychological diagnoses about what's happening inside of her. There's definitely all kinds of trauma and moral injury, and we're going to get into all that about if she were sitting with me in my therapist office, this is the kind of conversation I'd be having with her. We're also going to pull out some real life lessons, because the stuff that's happening to her and inside of her is stuff I see going on in real life every day. I'm Trey Tucker. I'm a mental health therapist, and this is Rugged, where we're making your 20s and 30s legendary. All right, let's start with her story, because Cate wasn't always evil. She was actually made this way. And what's scary is not just the fact that she's a superhuman that can go really dark. She's actually started out as a pure, really wanted to check on people, had a high emotional intelligence, and was kind of the calm one, the grounded one in the whole friend group. She was always checking on Marie when she was anxious and helping her calm down. And she was just seen as the one people could go to when they needed to be grounded. So that's how she started, and she used her superpower, that the ability to touch someone and get them to do whatever she said and to forget whatever they needed to forget. She could use that in a way that was actually helpful to people. But then her own past trauma history and the people that were trying to manipulate her, they started to get inside of her head and started to split her in different directions. The key to understanding Cate is that she learned both love and control at the same time, and that was her downfall. Because she started empathetically, but then the people that were around her showed her that really the only way that she was actually being useful or helping somebody is to actually control them. And we're going to go into some ways that she could have gone and some ways that she can heal that. But we need to know she didn't start out evil, but she was built for it by the people around her. So, for example, the trauma that turned her from protector into a weapon is knowing that her trauma was used against her. One of the things that everybody goes through at this God, you, and we're going to get to why that name is significant in other episodes where I'm going to break this down. But one of the things they do is they find out what happened to these kids in their younger years. And there's always some sort of trauma history. And once they got those kids to open up and show them that wound, then they could use that wound against them and try to turn that against humans or whoever else might represent that person that originally gave them that wound, that traumatic wound. So in other words, the authority figures around her, they really did groom her into becoming this weapon instead of this protector. So from a young age, Cate realized that she could control people's minds, and instead of protecting her and protecting that gift and helping her use it in a way that's heroic, they turned her into a manipulator and actually exploited her because of her gift. So for example, from the very start, Vought and Godolkin, they were using her as the main way to cover up all the horrific acts that were going on in the woods. And she was told that she was saving everybody by wiping their memories clean. But obviously we know now that was not the case. And every time she hesitated, they were framing it as, well, if you hesitate, you're giving up on these lives. You could be saving these lives if you acted immediately. So every time you hesitate, you're letting people down. You hear that enough in real life or in this show, you hear whatever it is enough, and you're probably going to go that direction. So she learned a few things. She learned that love equals obedience. She learned protection equals manipulation. And then she learned that safety equals control. And none of those things are actually true, but those were the messages that were implanted in her deeply, and those became the engines for all of her thinking and decision-making going forward. When she became the emotional caretaker of the group, she was carrying everybody else's pain along with her own. She wasn't dealing with her own, so that burden got heavy, and then taking on everybody else's pain when she would touch them. There was some sort of transference that was happening there. And then she wiped away their trauma and guilt while it all still was piling up into her. She basically became she had no other identity other than this shell of being the protector for everybody. So she lost herself, and when you lose yourself, you're more easily manipulated by people who are trying to exploit you. Now let's look at the system that created this weapon. All right, so let's start with Shetty. When she was in charge at God U, she would praise Cate only for when she did whatever it was she was trying to get her to do. So Cate starts taking this message away that I'm only going to get praised, I'm only going to get affirmed whenever I obey. So she had this connection where if I obey, that means I'm protecting my friends. And I'm only useful if I'm being a protector. And a lot of times if our purpose becomes our identity, we get in trouble because we have to know we're separate from our identity. We're separate from what we do. That's why we're called human beings instead of human doings. But Cate was able to manipulate her into thinking that the only way to protect people is to control them, and you're really only worthwhile. You really only have value when you're protecting, and you're only protecting when you're doing it the way I say you should do it. So the other way she was also lied to is that the only way to protect your friends is to make them forget the truth. So the system, including Cate and everybody that came after her, was rewarding her every time she manipulated somebody. So in Cate's mind, she was justifying, like, I care about you by taking away your choice. And by taking away your choice, I'm protecting you, so therefore I'm loving you. It's a twisted way to start thinking, but when you hear it over and over, you get broken down into believing it. So it really is a process. They took her through this process to make her their own little weapon. Number one, they made her feel special. And if you think back, she was abandoned by her family because her family was scared of her. That scene where the mother told the police officer, I'm scared of her, keep your distance from her. That's going to create huge gaps, huge voids in you, and you're going to be looking for ways to get the acceptance and to make yourself feel special. So if somebody else makes you feel special, you're so much more likely to do whatever it is they want you to do. So that was step one. Then they told her, hey, you're the only one who can help. And that sounds really good on the surface. That sounds like something you want to step into because we all have this part of us that wants to be the hero. So step three, they rewarded her obedience. Step four, they isolated her from any sort of outside perspective so that there was really in her mind only one way to see things. And then five, they justified her manipulation as protection. And here's where things get dangerous for Cate. She starts to believe somewhere along the line that I can fix you. I can save you. Just let me touch you and let me give you my powers. And the problem is every time she touched somebody, she would get this God-like moment of dopamine rush. When we really step up and feel like a hero, there is a dopamine rush. There's an adrenaline rush. But the lie starts creeping into Cate that she thinks that control and compassion are the same things. And if you think that you can control people while also being compassionate to them, and you get this godlike hit of dopamine and adrenaline, then you start to be able to justify anything. And she didn't start out trying to hurt anybody, but if you think you're helping, but control is the way you're doing it, then you can keep on pushing your control, and in the back of your mind think, but I'm trying to help. I think this is what is really what's best because I'm so much better than everybody, or I know so much more than everybody. You get this godlike complex going on. Cate didn't just become this massive villain overnight. It actually started with small steps, little bits at a time. And she slowly, for what she thought were good reasons, she was slowly crossing lines little by little until the lines then became blurry. And then eventually she couldn't see the lines anymore. So let's think about this. When she first started using her powers that we know of, she was using them against Luke. And she thought she was using them for Luke's own good, but that was the lie. Every time I quote unquote, help Luke, it was actually creating this shift in her mind about her morals, about what's right and where the autonomy of another person comes in. So she would wipe his memory repeatedly about the woods, and then she would justify it by saying, well, I don't want him to suffer. And each time she did that, she was taking away his agency, his autonomy, his identity, to where basically she was becoming the puppet master and doing whatever she wanted to him, whenever she wanted to him. And then toward the end of season 1, when she starts to get revealed as the enemy, she has this breaking point moment. This is the point where a villain is either made or can be reformed. The villain can either confess or break. And unfortunately, she ended up breaking because she justified it. There's a psychological term called cognitive dissonance where you have these competing truths in your head. Like in her mind, I love these people was one truth, and then I violated their minds is another truth, and then therefore violating their minds must be love. So she starts justifying it to her friends like, but I love you, and I did this for your own good, and you don't know what I know, and I was trying to save you. And so instead of owning it, she justified it. And that's how a villain gets deeper into their story, and that's how they end up breaking trust. So they think they're the protector, and she thought she was the protector, but she was holding on to that identity because that's really all she had. Because again, she's under that lie that if I'm only useful if I'm protecting people and doing what these people that are giving me affirmation say. So Cate isn't just a villain. She's actually the scariest kind of villain. She's the villain that still thinks she's the good guy. So let's take how she treated Luke as an example. She was not heartless when dealing with him. She was actually heartbroken, and that brokenheartedness kept her on to keep on pushing Luke. And eventually when Luke took his own life, it broke her heart. It really did hit her hard. So it shows that she isn't cold. She actually really does feel things deeply. It's just in her mind, the only way out of the problem was more of the things that caused the problem in the first place. So she felt it deeply, but that makes her so much more dangerous because her emotions plus her power plus her past trauma, that all leads to chaos. And then you flip it to where she eventually talks about Sam. And she talks to him at some point and says, look, I don't want to hurt you like I did Luke. And that was her conflicted side. But then when she got pushed far enough and the humans ended up hurting her enough and hurting the people around her enough, then she started justifying things where she saw Sam as her chance for redemption. But instead of healing Sam and healing the people around her, she took her version of healing and she made it to where she's going to take her powers and turn it into justice instead of healing, or what she thought was going to bring justice. So this proves that she didn't lose her ability to love. She just took her love and infused it with control. So she weaponized empathy, and that's why people followed her, because she was empathetic. She feels people's pain, but then she uses that pain in them to steer them. And so she isn't evil because she lacks emotion. She's actually really scary because she does feel everything, and then she still chooses control. So then she uses Sam. She decides, all right, Sam's got this strength that I don't have, so I'm going to use that strength to build a new system. The system hurt us, so I'm going to build a new one. And that sounds noble, but she's doing it the wrong way. She doesn't use logic. She's using emotional manipulation, and she's using Sam's trauma against him. She kind of frames herself as the only one that understands Sam and all the things that he's been through. And she becomes his safe person, the person that he can always turn to. And then she's just turning him into a soldier. And if you think about it, that's the exact same thing that Cate did to her, using her trauma against her, making her feel like, hey, I'm your only friend here. That cycle just continues and just gets passed on to the next step. And that's how a lot of these manipulative leaders really form their loyalty. They isolate the victim, they mirror their pain, they offer protection, they provide a mission, and then they turn their trauma into fuel. And this is what Cate does. She unites these superpowered people with fear. And a lot of times fear does get people motivated and it does bring loyalty, but in the end, it just destroys internally and all the bonds around you because eventually you just don't know who you can trust anymore. So she started using these phrases like humans are trying to wipe us out. And I'm paraphrasing here, but the messages that she was sending as a leader are, humans are trying to wipe us out. We got to strike first. Anybody who hesitates is a traitor. We know that from Cate's manipulation and conversations in the past. So now the psychological term we're dealing with here is moral splitting. Moral splitting is there's this black and white thing. Like, I know in my head that there's some gray area, but the things that I say to other people are going to show that I'm all in on one of them. And in my mind, when I know there's a conflict, there's something that's splitting in my own head, and that's eventually going to wear me down. But on the outside, I got to show there's no nuance. There's no room for conversation. If you're not with me, you're the enemy. Those are the kinds of things that on the outside, it seems really clear morally, but on the inside, she's conflicted, and that's where that moral splitting comes in. So Cate's becoming the thing that she hated. She thinks she's building justice, but she's really just building oppression, just using different branding. And at the time of this recording, we're through episode 7 of season 2, so I don't know where her character arc is going to go from here, but right now, we're back in the place where we can kind of trust her because she's promising not to use her powers on her friends anymore, and she does seem genuine, but she has seemed genuine in the past. But because of those past traumas, she can so easily be turned the wrong direction again because there's still that spot that hasn't been healed in her. And when we have those spots that haven't been healed, those are the spots that can lead us right back into the old habits that we thought we had escaped and that other people thought we had escaped. So I don't really trust her to actually go fully forward and being always on the side of her friends because I think she can take a few steps in that direction and actually be helpful. But then the moment her past wound is hit again, like a bruise that gets hit again, I think that's going to steer her back into that tyrant mode where she decides to use the moral splitting and the justification of using her powers against her friends, all in the name of what she thinks in her mind is protecting them. All right, now let's look at Cate from a psychological perspective, and I'm going to look into some possible diagnoses, like if she was sitting with me in the therapy office. First thing I'm always looking for whenever I'm trying to help somebody figure out the root issue of whatever the habit is that they're struggling with or whatever the challenge is they're trying to overcome, is I'm trying to figure out what is the core wound. Because when that core wound happens, we have a message or a meaning that we assign or we attach to that core wound. For Cate, the core wound originally was her parents or her family abandoning her parents being afraid of her. And then she has this wound of like, all right, nobody really loves me. I need acceptance. And I'm going to take that acceptance wherever I can get it. So that's where Cate became such a pivotal figure for her. She gave her that acceptance. She gave her what seemed like true love, and you could see it in the look in her eyes when Cate was saying, hey, I just need you to do this one more thing. I love you, and then we're going to go be together forever, almost unofficially trying to adopt Cate. And you can see the look in Cate's eyes as she looked up at Cate when she was giving her that hug. There was almost just a little 5-year-old again, just longing for that love that her mom pulled away from her. And so Cate tapped into that wound, but then the wound that got stacked on top of that for Cate was the fact that, well, now I look back and I realize the people that were supposed to be protecting me abandoned me or exploited me. So now she's dealing with 2 wounds, the abandonment wound and the being exploited wound. And if you think about it, from those early teenage years on, she was used by Cate and other adults just for her powers, just for what she could do to be useful for them. And she was told, of course, that using your powers is the thing that's going to be the best for the greater good, this whole deontological, philosophical statement. And then anytime that Cate hesitated, Cate either showed disappointment in her, like removing the love from her with guilt trips, or love bombing. Cate was a master at love bombing Cate, just pouring on what she knew she needed in that moment to then soften her up and get her to do whatever she needed to do. So it's this push-pull thing of pushing with the love bombing, pulling by removing the love and pouring the guilt onto her. So ultimately, Cate's pain is never actually cared for. It's just used as fuel. So some of the messages Cate took away. Safety only exists if I control the situation. Because again, safety is one of those huge needs that it's a legitimate need. It's just how we're going to go about actually creating or getting that safety. So she thought it only came through controlling the situation. She thought protecting other people meant sacrificing myself. And she thought, if I don't step up, nobody else will. So that's what produced this core identity in her of I'm the protector. But when your identity becomes the protector and the world keeps hurting you, you start controlling instead of protecting. But you justify it in your mind that thinking that the control is the protection. And if we look at Cate's relationships, her relationships are really the key to understanding what's going on psychologically with her, because her attachment style shows up in almost every relationship that she's got. And I would say she's got a fearful-avoidant attachment style. So if you think about it, well, let me explain what that is. It's somebody who craves intimacy, really does want to have that deep connection with somebody, but then pulls away when they start to get it. So she wants that deep connection, but if you look at every single one of her relationships, she would get that connection, and then she would either pull back literally, or she would start to manipulate and control, because she thought that's how that connection and that intimacy was going to stay around. So she wants it, but she also fears the abandonment, because again, that core wound is abandonment from her family. So she wants the intimacy, she wants the affirmation and affection, but then she's afraid it's going to get pulled away. She's afraid she's going to get abandoned. So her style is, I'm going to push people away before they can hurt me, or I'm going to control them before they can hurt me, because again, she thinks control is protection, and self-protection in her mind needs to be controlled, or the situation needs to be controlled so that she can control herself. And that's where the safety comes in. Again, that safety is a legitimate need, but it creates this fearful and avoidant attachment style because the very thing that we want is also the thing that got us hurt in the past. So there's this conflict going on inside of us. Like, I want this, but every time I get afraid of it, that it's going to leave. And so I got to control it, or I got to push somebody else away before they can hurt me. So if you think about it, her relationship with Luke, she really does love him, but she keeps erasing his memories. And so that's where the control started to become more important for her than the actual vulnerability. And then all of her friends, she was controlling their minds and wiping their memories to what she called protect them, but they never truly knew what she was doing. So it wasn't an equal relationship. There's no true intimacy unless you're on the same level with somebody else. And then finally, of course, with Sam, they got close, and then she used that closeness to steer him like a weapon. So she formed bonds in order to control him all at the same time. So even in her mind, I don't think she actually saw what she was doing, but when you zoom out, you can see it's all that attachment style at work that are driving these decisions. So to summarize Cate's attachment style, she thought, if I let you get too close, you're either going to abandon me, or you're going to hurt me, or you're going to get hurt yourself. So I'm going to control the closeness. So in her mind, control became safer than vulnerability. All right, now let's look at Cate's defense mechanisms, because anytime somebody's dealt with trauma in the past, we always have defense mechanisms to keep that pain from happening again. So the 5 things that she uses are really common, and you'll see these in real life. There's control, dissociation, gaslighting, justification, and Darvo. And we're going to get to what Darvo means in a second. But she's a case study in all these because she's using these defenses and she's using them really effectively. She's actually a master at them. So control, we've gone over that one. She thinks control equals safety. So if she just controls people's thoughts, that'll keep them from leaving her. So she's safe from the rejection or the abandonment. Dissociation. So she's erasing somebody else's memories, theirs and possibly her own, because that every time she would push somebody, it would really take a toll on her, both physically and mentally. And she kept alluding to how it was starting to mess with her own brain. So I think in her own emotions, every time she would wipe somebody else's emotions and memories away, she was also dissociating from her own guilt and from her own pain. And it never actually got dealt with. That guilt and pain stayed down there without actually getting acknowledged. And whatever we don't actually deal with, it's going to come up and out of our body through some sort of behavior at some point. So repression never works. And it really became a metaphor for how she copes. It's just stuff it down, repress it, and keep moving. And then gaslighting. She doesn't just lie to people. She actually reprograms reality for them. She tells them, like, not only is she changing their memories, but she's also justifying things. So we move from gaslighting with superpowers, changing what they thought they saw, what they thought they heard, and what they thought happened. She's literally rewriting it in their own heads. And the true gaslighters in real life are pretty good at this as well. She's taken that to a superpower level. But then that justification also becomes a little bit part of that gaslighting manipulation. So it's that justification loop where she thinks she's doing stuff for the greater good. So any actions she took are really in her mind okay, because again, she's going for this end goal of protecting everybody else. Like, you don't understand. I did what I had to do. You don't know what I know. You don't have the powers I have. So there was this like godlike complex and a savior complex in there where she thought that she was the only answer and that only her tactics were the only ones that were going to be able to be used. So she used that pain against people and then guilt tripped them and then justified it and then kept repeating it over and over every time they would confront her or she would mess up. All right, now let's move to DARVO. It's an acronym. It stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. So when she is confronted, she would deny the wrongdoing. She would then attack the other people for not understanding. Well, you just don't get it. She would raise that voice and really make them feel guilty for not understanding her perspective. So she positions then herself as the real victim. That's the reverse victim part. Well, like, I didn't do it, wasn't as bad as you thought, and you don't understand me, and that means that I'm the victim here, so you should feel sorry for me. Does this sound familiar sometimes in real life? And so this message of like, you have no idea what I've done for you. How ungrateful are you? Putting that guilt trip on somebody. So she becomes the offender, but she claims that she's the victim. And then she, in her mind, gets to treat everybody else as the bad guy or as the offenders. And that is advanced psychological warfare. It's kind of impressive writing from the show writers as well. So this leads us to the question, is Cate a narcissist? She's not a narcissist. She does have narcissistic tendencies, but it's a narcissistic injury. It's what we call, it's like trauma-born grandiosity. It's like you get hurt so much that as a defense mechanism, you build yourself up to be this grand, godlike figure that knows best for everybody. And that doesn't turn her necessarily into a full narcissist, but it's a narcissistic injury that causes her to act in certain ways. So the trauma from her past, it put these messages in her head, like you were powerless, you were used, you were disposable. And it's a good thing for us to think about, like from our own past painful experiences, what messages got put into our brain when those moments happened, because those messages really do become this lens that we see the world through, and then they become the driving forces for our decision making and our thought processes moving forward. So her own brain and psyche, it starts to overcorrect because of that traumatic past. So we call these inner vows. Some inner vows that I think she had going on is, I will never be powerless again. I will be the one in charge, because if I'm in charge, I can help people avoid the pain, and I can avoid the pain myself, and no one will ever use me. I get to decide who I get to use. So that's the grandiosity as a self-defense, and that's that narcissistic tendency in her. But I'll explain in a second here why she's not a narcissist. But so those traits of narcissism are the entitlement to control people's minds, of course, the belief that she's the only one that sees the truth, and the expectation that other people are going to follow her, and then the rage that happens when they don't follow her. But what makes her not a narcissist is that she still feels guilt. She still really does love her friends, and she wants that connection, and she wants the best for them. She just has this twisted sense of how to justify getting that outcome. And she still really does have a conscience. You can see it on her face, and you can see it in some of her actions. Every time she's bouncing like a yo-yo back and forth, like doing the right thing, doing the wrong thing, you can see she's wrestling. It's like she's wrestling with one angel on one shoulder and a demon on the other, and she's trying to figure out which one's the right one. We can see it when we're zoomed out, but man, when you're in the moment of something like that, it really does become tough to figure out what the right path is. But since she loves them and she does have a conscience, she's not too far gone. But that contradiction of the narcissistic injury, along with the love and still the ability to feel the pain and the guilt, that actually becomes a pretty dangerous combination, because she's trying to figure out a way like out of this hole that she knows she's in, but she doesn't have the right tools and the right path to get out. So Cate's building an army of broken people, taking their pain, showing them that she can fix it by wiping the memories or changing how they feel or feeling nothing, using Sam as an example of how she can help people to feel numb and forget about that pain. So she's building this whole army of broken people, and that's different from Homelander. Let's compare her to Homelander for a second. Homelander's using fear as a way to control people's bodies. Cate is taking people's pains as a way to control their hearts. Two totally different ways of controlling people, but the outcome is still the same. One of the most fascinating things about Cate is that she didn't become evil because she craved power. She became evil because she was afraid of being powerless. Let that sink in for a second. If you think about it, like she's just modeling the system that traumatized her. Think about Vought and God You. The messages that they were preaching to her is that you got to control people for their own good. You got to hide the truth to protect them. You got to sacrifice the few to protect the many. And you're special if you obey. So they're meeting those emotional needs in her and then telling her those messages over and over. And it really does seem like the truth about all that. And Cate copied all those methods. So here's some examples. The system used Cate to wipe people's memories, and Cate used her powers to wipe her friends' memories. The system, God, You, and Vought, they used lies to protect Soups and the reputations, and Cate used lies to protect her friends and their future. The system claims moral superiority, and Cate then turns around and claims her own moral superiority. The system believes that the ends justify the means, and then Cate starts to believe that the ends justify the means. So here's why this happens, and this is more of a real life thing. Trauma, it makes somebody like Cate think, well, if I destroy the system, then I'll be the one that runs it. And if I'm the one that's running it, not only do I not have to be hurt anymore, other people don't have to get hurt anymore. But in their minds, they justify getting to that point by causing more pain. And so that's exactly how the cycles of this kind of traumatic abusive behavior happens, is that victims, they often don't become saints. They often become the next generation of oppressors, not because they're evil, but because they hated what was done to them, and they'll use any means necessary to change the tactics. But in using any means necessary, they're using the same tactics that hurt them in the first place. And she also is an antichrist archetype, because she's telling people, look, I will save you if you surrender your will to me and letting me control your memories and control your emotions. And if you surrender yourself in that way, then I'll save you. A true savior is going to save somebody for their own good, and they allow their true free will to stay intact. And that's the truth of the gospel, is that we bring ourselves, we bring our brokenness, but we still have our choice. We still have our own freedom to choose this way or that way, toward God or not toward God. An antichrist figure, they want the control. They want you to only go their way and give up any kind of free will. So Cate's an example and a warning sign to all of us about what can happen when we don't deal with our trauma from the past. There's really three options you have. First option is you can heal it. Second option is to numb it. Third option is try to control everything and everybody around you. And unfortunately, Cate chose the control aspect. And that's normal. That's common, at least. And the problem is she took her unhealed trauma and combined it with her power, and then combined it with her intelligence, and then her empathy. And that mixture, on the surface, it can seem like it could be helpful, but instead it got turned toward this villain arc. And so she's living proof that trauma doesn't always make you soft. It can actually make you cold-blooded and calculating and really unstoppable, because you can feel justified in some of your actions. So here's the thing. If I were actually counseling Cate and she was sitting in front of me, I've got a process I would take her through. First one, I would ask her to confront the truth. Like, hey, look, let's acknowledge that, yeah, you got abandoned by your family. You got hurt. And man, that hurt still sticks around. You got to acknowledge that. You have to actually recognize that for it to actually dissipate. When you stuff it down or try to numb it out, it just compacts like a spring. And eventually that spring is going to come exploding back up. And that's what's happening with Cate during this part of the show. Toward the end of season 2 is like just all these internal battles, I think, are finally going to come to an end. And it may not happen until season 3, but something is being set up for a big explosion. Her past behaviors are always going to be an indication of what's probably going to happen again. So she's going to keep going back and forth, and that's going to continue until she confronts the truth. So yeah, my parents abandoned me. I was hurt. I was a victim. I was, not am, but I was used. And look, it wasn't your fault. Let's confront that truth as well. You didn't ask for this. Your parents gave you the V shot, and your parents were the ones that chose to abandon you. So let's confront that truth. Second step I'd take her to is, look, let's feel it, because you got to feel it to heal it. You probably heard that saying before. She's got to let herself break. She's got to let other people see her weakness or her vulnerability, see that pain. And then she's got to stop performing as like the strong one, the only one that can take on other people's pains and emotions, and the only person who can fix something. She's got to actually stop performing and choose an identity that's separate from whatever she does, from her performance, because we are not what we do. Again, we're human beings, not human doings. Third step, I would practice consent with her. So she had a good habit of asking for consent before using her powers, but then she slips back. So we'd have to go back into asking for respect, building that trust, especially with her friends. Fourth step, you got to repair the relationship. You got to admit what you did wrong. You actually got to apologize without making an excuse. You can't say, I'm sorry if I offended you, or if I hurt you, or I'm sorry, but it's just, boom, I'm sorry. Here's the pain I caused you. Tell me more. What else did I cause for you? I'm sorry. I want to hear it. Those are the kinds of apologies that really repair relationships. And then let them talk back. Don't try to control the outcome. Allow them to respond and tell you what your actions did to them. And finally, I would take her through like a rebranding. This is the fifth step. Like, who are you now that you're not everybody's savior? Because once you got to figure out who you are when you're not fixing everybody. And a lot of times therapists or people in helping professions, we can get our worth and our value from being a helper. So We can help, but we also got to be somebody separate from that. It's just something we do. Will I let myself be loved without being useful? That's what I would ask Cate, and that's what I would ask anybody that finds themselves in that kind of situation. So those 5 steps would heal her. We would go deeper into those when we do some trauma healing like EMDR or parts work in IFS. But those are the 5 steps that actually could make a difference in her. So vulnerability is the thing that's going to bring her healing. But vulnerability is also the thing that her trauma tells her she can't ever allow again. So that's going to keep her stuck until she's willing to go through that process of being vulnerable. And here's the thing, the heartbreaking thing is she has all the ingredients to be so helpful and so powerful in such amazing, helpful ways. She has Marie's heart. She's got Jordan's complexity. She's got Emma's longing to be loved. She's got Andre's burden of leadership. And she's got Sam's trauma. So she was all of the main characters in one. She could have united them, she could have healed them, and she could have helped them set a path toward a really heroic destination. So that's why she's the most realistic villain in all of television. She's got the same ingredients we all have, so we all have that potential to go that direction. Let me know in the comments, what did you think? What did I leave out? What do you disagree with? I want this to be a two-way street, because the more we can identify these traits in these fictional characters, the more we can grow through them and get them out of our lives so that we can become fully legendary. I'll see you next time.